Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about repurposing vintage jewelry. I've acquired several pieces, which, if you look at them for their parts, this can be taken apart and used in several different pieces. So right now my plan for this is to take apart and use this centerpiece and probably put some type of either agate or crystal hanging down and do a kumihimo braid for the necklace part of it. These pieces can be repurposed into another necklace piece, and the rounds can be used as a bracelet or bracelet stack. I'm kind of thinking to do some sort of a memory wire bracelet that would match what I do with this piece. And then these I plan on making into a pair of earrings that will also match what I do here. The chain, most chain can be repurposed. You just have to double check to make sure that that they do in fact have some sort of a split that you can twist apart like a jump ring, and you can repurpose chain in other necklaces or for earrings. You can use them as you can use the individual links as jump rings. And this chain is in really good shape. Depending on the shape of clasps, I may reuse those. Jump rings I don't reuse, because those, after you've pulled them apart and used them, they can, unlike a chain link, jump rings can become brittle. So I don't reuse the jump rings, but I do reuse clasps if they're in good shape. So I've taken apart my piece, and I have the main focal that I want to redesign. You can see I've got a hole in the top here and then several holes on the bottom. So what I decided I was going to do is, I did decide on a kumihimo, and what I'm going to use is Botswana agate. So I am going to do at least a portion of an 8-strand kumihimo with these 4mm Botswana agate Botswana agate stones. And I think I want the finished kumihimo piece to be between 6 and 8 inches. I'm gonna pull out my board and measure and see what that will look like and make a final determination, and then I can start this aspect of the project. I did also decide that I'm going to use antique copper as my metal. I'm going to use a copper core for my kumihimo, so that way I can then do wire wrapped endings. And I have a variety of antique copper toggle clasps that I can choose from. And then to finish off the sides, I have several larger Botswana agate stones in different shapes. And so I am going to basically include those with some antique copper beads along the sides. And then to finish off the bottom, I am also going to do use the 4mm stones and possibly some small antique copper beads. I have to look through my stash to see what I like. But I liked the copper because it is, again, it really picks up the brown earthy tones. I wanted to do an antique coppers because this is an older vintage piece, so I didn't want anything that was too bright and shiny. For my kumihimo, I am going to use a dark brown Ceylon thread. Again, keeping everything within the browns, and it will pick up nicely the browns that are in these beads. So I now have all of my beads strung, and I have everything on the kumihimo disc. And I actually started to do a little bit of braiding to do the fiber tail for the beginning. But a step that I added that is new to me, that I have not worked with before, is I'm adding a wire core. Because what I want to have happen is have bind off wire at either end of the braid to do a wire wrapped loop on either end to finish off the braid, so I can then attach the other pieces of the necklace to that. So this is a 22 gauge wire. I didn't want anything too thick. 22 gauge is a nice gauge. You can even do 24 and be okay. It's nice that it's thin enough that it won't be overly bulky and hard to work with, but it's sturdy enough that it will provide some form to your piece and will make a very nice wire wrapped loop for the ending of your braid. So all I did was just start braiding around this piece of wire. Every time I turn, I hold the wire up here, I bring down a cord, I bring down a cord, I bring up a cord, so that way it braids around this core. So I have the wire that I cut. Now the braid itself that I only want it to be about 12 inches, but the wire itself I cut to be 18 inches. And the reason I did that is because I want it to be the length of the beaded piece, plus to allow for a little bit of length that I'm going to need in the fiber braid for binding off at the end, plus allow enough for my wire wrapped loop that is going to wrap around the binded braid. So this is another one of those situations where it's better to cut off more than you're going to need, because it's not really possible to add on wire to something like this and have it be sturdy and look nice. So you want to try to do it all in one piece so you have a nice streamlined look and you have enough wire. And the worst that happens is you're cutting off some wire at the end that maybe you end up using as an eye pin for something or something like that. So that is where I'm at in the process right now. So I'm going to work some more on, I need a little bit more fiber braid here on this end, and you can see I left about 2 inches on the end off of the fiber braid part. So this is going to be what I use for my wire wrap on this. And so once I get what I want in length in terms of the fiber braid, then I can start adding beads. And adding beads around the core will work just like it is for adding the fiber. So if you could see this, and it's all very dark, but you can see the way that I have this core coming out the center of the braid, and that's what we want. That's what I hope we want. As I said, this is my first time working with a core for a braid, but I belong to a wonderful community online, and I checked out with them what I thought my process would be for this, and so they gave it the thumbs up. So this is what I'm going to try, and we're going to see how it comes out. So far, I'm liking the results. So I have finished the kumihimo braid with the 4mm Botswana agates, and I successfully got it around a wire core. So the next step is going to be to bind this off. And this is my first time working with a wire core. So part of what I'm going to have to do is bind this off and then cut off the excess fiber, but keep the wire in place, because then I need to be able to make a loop and wrap it around the braid that I bind off. So that's my next step in this process. But I'm pleased with how the braid came out. I'm glad that I used the chocolate cord, because if I look very closely, yes, you can see cording, but at a distance it blends in, so it doesn't really show up or anything like that. So I'm glad I did that matching. And I ended up with about 9 inches of beaded braid to work with. So that's substantial. If I put the pendant down kind of like this, it's a nice substantial rope to accommodate the pendant. And the pendant is the last thing I'm going to work on. I want to get the main necklace put together, and then decide what I'm going to do with the pendant in terms of what beads I'm going to hang off of it and how I'm going to attach it to the main rope. So I have completed the braid and I took it off the disc, and here's where we're at so far. It was a 9-inch braid, so I have about 4.5 inches on each side. For the focal, and I've got about 4.5 inches on each side of this necklace. And what I ended up doing, so the ends worked out partly the way that I had hoped. Doing the wire core was definitely the right move, because it helps give some shape and keep some shape to this part of the necklace. It gives me something to create an infinite loop for terminating the ends. And let me see if I can bring this a little closer. So what I've learned in this process is that, one, I like the idea of sewing through the braid with my binding cord, wrapping it around and sewing through again. I definitely needed to leave more wire for wrapping, because as you can see, I ran out. I don't think in the end that this is going to be a major problem, because I can always take another piece and kind of pick up where I left off, and it will be okay. This necklace is for me, so that's fine. But I also want to try some large hole beads and see if I can stack them to kind of tidy this up. And I need to trim these little cord ends. I had more of those than I really wanted, but they can be trimmed away carefully. So I'm going to, for now, leave this and not do anything more to this end. And what I did with the other end is I bound it off, and I didn't do the loop yet, because again, I want to experiment with some large hole beads in an antique copper and decide how I really want to finish this off. If I'm really going to do a wire wrap, a full wire wrap, or if I'm going to do the some large hole beads and a wire wrap. So what I ultimately ended up doing here was I had bought some large hole beads that gave me a 3.5 millimeter hole. I was able to unwind the end wire that I had originally wrapped and got the beads on that one, and then added it to the other wire that I had yet to wrap. And that really cleaned up the ends very nicely. And altogether, I've got just under just about 5 inches on each side now. So the next step is to take out the rest of my Botswana agate beads and my spacers, my antique copper spacers, and put together the rest of the necklace. And I want to get each side up to about 9 inches because I'm thinking that 18 inches is going to be the length that I want. I don't want this to be long. I don't want the necklace part to be too long. Because the pendant with all of its attachments are going to have some length to it as well. So I got this laid out. I played around with some different Botswana agate beads. I know I wanted to do the big chunky rounds. It was just a matter of what pattern I wanted to do them in. And I was originally going to introduce these copper beads somewhere in the pattern, but I ended up not liking them because I felt that they blended in too much and didn't do anything to really accent the pattern. And I wanted to have a little bit of the feeling of a little bit of air between these clusters of the big agates. So what I ended up doing was doing 3 of the 8mm with a antique copper daisy spacer in the middle, and 3 4mm rounds, and then repeating the pattern. And I should have, by the time I string all this together, a 20-inch necklace. I have to do the stringing. I'm going to have to string each side separately because I did this in the center. And then what I experimented with is I've had this idea for doing a bail. I really wanted to keep the bail super simple, given everything else that's going on with the necklace. So this is 22 gauge wire, and I would use 20 gauge wire when I do this for real. But I used a 16mm dowel, thick dowel, and did a coil around it to see if it would fit over the Kumihimo braid. And the plan is that I'm going to do, I'm going to put one or two large Botswana agate beads at the top of this, wire wrap, and then wire wrap it on to the center piece of the bail. And the ends of the bail I'm just going to terminate in a very small loop so it doesn't catch on anything. But that's how I'm going to attach it to the necklace. So that way I don't want the pendant right up against this Kumihimo. I want it set down a little bit. So that's how I think I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and string this together and get this part set up, get the actual necklace rope taken care of. And then I'll start playing around with the bail and see if my idea is going to work. So this is the completed necklace. What I ended up doing, let me zoom in a little bit. I had originally started off with a multi-coil bail, but I didn't like the way that it looked, and there were some structural issues with it. So what I ended up doing was bring it down to one single loop, and then I wire wrap the two ends together with some 24 gauge wire. And then I hung this part that I had done previously. I just hung it off of the ring that I created. For the dangles, I had originally made jump rings that I was going to then hang the dangles off the jump rings. But I had some concerns in terms of whether they would really stay on or not. I really decided, you know, I'd taken a great deal of effort to make sure that the necklace part of this was wire wrapped and that there wasn't, there was as little a chance as possible that anything could slip out through a crack in a jump ring. So what I ended up doing was taking all the jump rings off, and then I wire wrapped these on with 24 gauge wire. And I started out with 5 Botswana agates here, and then with each one until I got to the middle, I added a Botswana agate and a copper rondelle, so that way I could accentuate the change in heights and the length difference and kind of make have it come to a bit of a point. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. I have to go back and look at when I actually started working on this. I mean, I've had the piece now for a couple of years, in terms of the original pendant and necklace. But I think it's probably been about maybe 6 weeks to 8 weeks since I've really started this in earnest, and tried to bring it to completion. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this transformation. Please like this video, follow my channel if you'd like to see more content like this, and happy beading.